I never thought the hardest battle of my life would begin inside my own home, not on a battlefield. Not during the years I spent wearing a uniform. Not during those cold nights when survival depended on silence. No. The real war started the day my daughter looked me in the eyes and asked, "Mom, who are you really?" And in that moment, I realized a secret I had, buried for 30 years, was finally clawing its way back to the surface. My name is Eleanor Hayes. Most people in my neighborhood knew me as a quiet widow who baked too much bread and spent her evenings watering roses. Nobody knew I had once commanded rescue operations overseas. Nobody knew I had spent years serving in military intelligence. Nobody knew how many nights I woke up shaking from memories I never spoke about. And nobody knew why I refused to talk about my past, especially my son-in-law, Daniel. Daniel thought I was weak. That was his first mistake. The second mistake was underestimating how far a mother would go to protect her daughter. The first time I met him, he smiled too perfectly. You know, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. That was Daniel. My daughter Olivia was completely in love with him. She believed he was charming, ambitious, caring. But years in military intelligence teach you something important. People reveal themselves in tiny details. The way they avoid direct answers. The way they study rooms before sitting down. The way their kindness feels rehearsed. Daniel carried every warning sign I had spent years learning to recognize. Still, Olivia was happy. And after everything she had already lost in life, I wanted desperately to let her have that happiness. So I stayed quiet. I buried my instincts. I buried my past. And I convinced myself that maybe I was simply being overprotective. But what I didn't know then was that Daniel had secrets of his own, dangerous ones, and eventually, those secrets would drag my daughter directly into the kind of nightmare I spent my whole life trying to escape, building the family dynamic after my husband Robert died. Olivia became my entire world. She was only 14 when cancer took him. I still remember sitting beside her hospital bed afterward because she refused to sleep alone. Every night she asked the same question, "Mom, are you going to leave too?" And every night I told her no. I meant it. I left the military shortly after Robert's funeral because I couldn't balance both worlds anymore. The missions, the grief, the responsibility of raising a broken teenager. I chose motherhood. At least that's what I told myself. The truth was more complicated. I was tired. Tired of violence. Tired of secrets. Tired of carrying memories nobody else could understand. So I disappeared into ordinary life. I became invisible on purpose. And for years, it worked. Until Daniel entered our lives. At first, Olivia seemed brighter around him. She laughed more. She called me less often because she was busy planning dates and vacations. A mother notices these things. You notice when your child starts building a life that no longer needs you at the center. And while part of me felt lonely, another part felt relieved. Because Olivia deserved happiness, or at least I thought she did. One evening, she invited me to dinner at their apartment. That night changed everything. Daniel spent most of the evening asking questions. Not normal questions. Specific questions. Questions about where I lived during certain years. Questions about whether I had ever traveled overseas. Questions about government work. He disguised them as casual conversation. But I noticed. I always noticed. Then came the moment that froze my blood. He pointed to an old scar on my wrist and quietly asked, "Military." My heart stopped. For a second, I felt 28 years old again. Standing in smoke and chaos while alarms screamed around me. I smiled carefully. Factory accident. I lied. Daniel stared at me for 2 seconds too long. Then he smiled, but this time, I saw it clearly. Recognition. That was the first night I became afraid of him. Over the next few months, Olivia slowly changed. She became quieter, more anxious, more careful with her words. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, she immediately defended Daniel. "He's stressed from work. He didn't mean it like that. You're overthinking things." Mom, I had heard those sentences before. Not from daughters. from victims. The worst part about emotional manipulation is that it rarely looks dramatic at first. It arrives slowly, like cracks spreading across glass. Daniel never yelled in public, never hit walls, never acted openly cruel. Instead, he controlled quietly. He corrected Olivia constantly, interrupted her, made jokes at her expense, convincing her she was forgetful, too emotional, too sensitive. And little by little, my confident daughter started disappearing. One night, she arrived at my house unexpectedly. It was raining. Her mascara had smeared down her cheeks, and the second I opened the door, I knew something terrible had happened. She sat at my kitchen table trembling. "Well, I made tea." Finally, she whispered, "Mom, I think Daniel is lying to me." My stomach tightened. She explained that large amounts of money had vanished from their joint account. Daniel claimed it was for investments, but every time she asked for details, he became defensive. Then came the sentence that changed everything. I found a second phone. Every instinct inside me sharpened instantly. I asked calm questions, careful questions. Where did she find it? Did she unlock it? Did Daniel know she had seen it? Olivia shook her head. I was scared. That word shattered me, because my daughter had never been afraid before Daniel. That night, after she fell asleep in the guest room, I sat alone in the dark, remembering skills I had spent years trying to forget: surveillance, pattern analysis, behavioral profiling. I told myself I was only protecting my daughter, but deep down, another part of me woke up that night, the soldier. And once that side of me awakened, there was no going back. The investigation begins next morning. I drove past Daniel's office. Then the gym he claimed to visit. Then the coffee shop he supposedly worked from on weekends. Nothing matched his schedule. Nothing. 3 days later, I watched him enter a warehouse district on the edge of town. He met two men. One handed him an envelope. And in that moment, I knew this situation was far worse than infidelity. Daniel wasn't just lying. He was involved in something illegal. I should have contacted authorities immediately. But fear complicated everything. Because if I exposed him publicly, my own military history might surface too. The classified operations, the hidden identity, the years I spent undercover. I had protected those secrets for decades, not for myself. For Olivia, I never wanted her carrying the burden of knowing what her mother had done to survive. But what I didn't know that day was that Daniel already suspected the truth. One evening, he arrived unexpectedly. At my home, he smiled politely while standing in my doorway, but his eyes were cold. "Olivia worries about you," he said. I crossed my arms. "That's kind of her." Then he leaned slightly closer. "You know, you don't seem like a retired school secretary. Double quote silence. Heavy silence. Then he whispered, "Military intelligence leaves certain habits behind." My blood turned ice cold. In that moment, the war officially began. Emotional collapse after Daniel left. I locked every door in the house for the first time in years. I opened the metal box hidden beneath my closet floor. Inside were photographs, documents, old medals, a service pistol I prayed I would never need again. My hands trembled as memories flooded back. People think soldiers fear combat most. They don't. What soldiers truly fear is becoming the person war trained them to be. I spent 30 years trying to become gentle again, trying to become ordinary. But Daniel threatened my daughter, and mothers do dangerous things when their children are threatened. The next week, Olivia called me crying. Daniel had accused her of spying on him. He smashed her laptop, then disappeared for 2 days. That was the moment my fear transformed into purpose. I told Olivia to pack a bag, come home. I said, but she hesitated. Because victims often mistake control for love. And hearing that realization nearly broke me. I spent the entire night awake, planning, watching, waiting. Then finally, the truth arrived. A former military contact returned my call. Daniel was connected to financial fraud investigations across 3 states, fake shell companies, stolen identities, money laundering. My daughter wasn't married to a difficult man. She was married to a predator. And suddenly, everything made sense. The final confrontation happened on a Thursday. Night. Rain hammered the windows while Olivia sat, trembling beside me. Daniel had finally realized she was leaving him, and desperate. People make reckless choices, he stormed into my house without knocking. His face twisted with rage. You've been turning her against me, he snapped. I stood slowly. For years, I had hidden who I was, hidden my strength, hidden the part of me trained to survive pressure. But that night, I stopped hiding. No, I said calmly. She finally saw you clearly. Daniel laughed bitterly. You think you can stop me? Then he made his final mistake. He threatened Olivia. Everything inside me went cold. Military training teaches emotional control, not fear, control. I stepped closer. And for the first time, I told him the truth. I spent 30 years serving this country, I said quietly. Men far more dangerous than you failed to break me. His confidence disappeared instantly. Then came the sound of police sirens. Because while Daniel was busy threatening us, authorities were already outside. I had spent weeks collecting evidence, documents, financial records, phone recordings, witness statements. Everything. Daniel stared at me in disbelief. You planned this? I looked him directly in the eyes. No, I answered. You planned this the moment you chose to destroy people for your own gain. Police escorted him out moments later. And as the front door closed behind him, Olivia collapsed into tears. Not tears of weakness, tears of release. For the first time in years, she was free. Emotional resolution weeks afterward were difficult. Healing always is. Olivia blamed herself for ignoring warning signs. She struggled with shame, embarrassment, anger, and I understood every emotion. Because survival often leaves invisible scars. One evening, she finally asked me the question she had avoided for years. Mom, what really happened during your military years? So I told her, not everything. Some memories still belong to silence, but enough. Enough for her to understand why I noticed danger so quickly. Enough for her to understand why strength sometimes looks quiet. When I finished speaking, Olivia cried softly. Then she held my hand and whispered, You spent your whole life protecting people. I smiled sadly. Sometimes protection costs pieces of yourself. But what mattered most was this. The cycle had ended. Daniel no longer controlled her. Fear no longer ruled our home. And the secret I carried for decades no longer owned me. Because the truth is, hiding your past may protect you for a while, but eventually, truth demands sunlight. And when it finally comes out, the people who tried to use your silence against you often become the ones exposed instead. So if there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's this. Strength isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It isn't revenge for the sake of revenge. Real strength is surviving without losing your humanity. And real victory is finally living without fear.